Welcome into episode 151 of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm Augustrometer.
Protecting your data from the people literally closest to you. Jailbreaks, new for 2019. And passwords, part 23. What's going on? Find out on this edition of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. Do you live with other people? Can those people work things? I got an interesting checklist from the people at Secure Mac this week that I thought might be a good thing to bring to the checklist by Secure Mac. Huh? The topic, digital privacy and relationships. Now, while that checklist that they sent mostly focuses on spouses or romantic entanglements, I don't know, maybe I'm paranoid, but it just seemed to me that the things on this list were good to keep in mind if you share your space with anyone. Kids, parents, coworkers, if you're one of those people who practically lives at work. Basically, if you're ever worried about the information on your Mac or iOS device being accessed by someone with relatively easy access to it, here are some of the easy ways that people can spy on you for which to look out. We will start in a scary place for a lot of people, your browser history.
The thing is, relationships are complicated, and it doesn't matter whether it's with a spouse or another loved one. We often allow that person access to our computer. I do with my wife, for example. And if you share a computer with anyone, everything on that laptop or computer is available to them, including your search and web history. In addition, if you filled out forms, just because of the way browsers cache things, those might be available to those people as well.
Right. Which, I mean, really quickly, you might be thinking, well, they know my name. They know my address. Your kids may have access to your credit card information. Or your spouse may have access to a credit card that you're keeping secret for some reason. And I'm not saying you should do that. I mean, communications and all that stuff. But you may have information that you don't necessarily want everybody to see who, that the forms, in the sake of convenience, might be holding on to, which might make it really convenient for somebody who shouldn't have that information.
Right. And as you mentioned earlier, you walk away from your work computer for a few minutes to go to the bathroom or get a drink of water. And anyone can walk over and take a look at what you've been looking at. So it doesn't, it goes beyond just family. And that's the scary part. If there's something you're doing that you'd rather remain private, use your browser's privacy mode. Safari has safe browsing. Chrome has incognito mode. In addition, you might look into a third-party privacy tool that removes history and cache data so that others can't see it.
It's funny because you mentioned a couple of times just walking away from your computer. The idea of leaving my computer open at all is kind of anathema to me. I'm curious what you do. I mean, do you use hot corners? Do you, use a super short time limit? How do you handle walking away from your machine when you do?
Well, I'm fortunate right now in that I work from home, but I do have a short time limit on my Mac that puts it to sleep. I forget the exact number of minutes, but it's very short period of time. And then it only wakes up with a password, a fingerprint, or my watch, which, to be honest, is really, really handy. For those who don't like to type passwords, yes, it can be a pain, but you're also limiting your risk. In addition, just shut the lid. And that takes care of it. If you have a laptop, I do this. If I'm leaving the house, I just shut the computer and don't have to worry about it. If somebody comes in after me, they will not have access to my computer. These kind of protections, they're super important when you're out also at, like a Starbucks. So if you take your laptop with you, and you walk away from it for a second, anyone has access. So make sure to kind of tighten up those security protocols on your computer.
Now, if you think we sound paranoid, heed the words of somebody who is paid to be paranoid. Nicholas Tauchek from Secure Mac. We ran this question by him as well. He said he uses a password prompt on Wake from Sleep, which it doesn't even occur to me that you can't have that. Close the lid or activate the screensaver, which is what I was talking about with the hot corners a moment ago. He says close the lid or activate a screensaver if I'm still going to be around, and full shutdown if he's leaving the house. So, I don't know. I spend so much time on my computer. The amount of time it takes to wake it from sleep or something like that feels negligible, because once I wake it from sleep, I'm probably going to be there for like an hour, maybe more, because, like you, everything I do is on my computer. So, yeah, I mean, just a few things to keep in mind there. Now, one of our oldest checklist friends to watch out for is, of course, our password.
Yeah, if somebody knows your password, they have access to everything, especially if you've used that password in multiple places. And we've talked about this a lot on this show. You may love the person you shared that password with, but sometimes those relationships don't last. And then they all of a sudden have access to your email, your social media, and even your phone's location. I recommend a strong, unique password for every single service that you use. And I recommend that you don't share those at all. Use a password manager like iCloud Keychain, 1Password, or Dashlane so that you don't have to write those passwords down. And as I've said before, when at all possible, enable two-factor authentication. That's so important.
And we have past checklists for both of those. If you're not sure about two-factor authentication, may I suggest checklist number 139. That was 2FA 101. As for passwords, you can head all the way back to checklist number 8, passwords, do's and don'ts. And of course, you can find both of those wherever you get this show or on this show's website, securemac.com/checklist. Now, along a similar line as locking your Mac screen, the next item on this checklist, pay attention to your phone lock.
It's amazing. I watch people all of the time and how easily they unlock their phone. And it's because they're using stupid codes, passcodes, in order to access their phone. And it's crazy to me. If you really value your privacy, make sure your passcode isn't something easy like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Or was it 0000 that some celebrity had earlier this year? They caught him on video,
Yes.
putting his passcode. It was 4 zeros. That was it, which is almost like not even having a passcode.
And also don't make it your birth date or your anniversary or
right.
your address or anything like that, because those are easily guessed. That kind of stuff really puts you at risk. And I hate to say it, but if you have a newer phone with Face ID, unless you have require attention enabled, somebody could actually unlock your phone using your face while you sleep. And that's kind of creepy. So check those settings, go to settings, and then general and accessibility to make sure require attention is enabled. People won't be able to unlock your phone with your face if you're asleep, or in a worst case scenario, if you're dead.
Unconscious. Just say unconscious.
Unconscious.
Okay. Thank you.
And if you're using an older phone, use a strong password. And if you have it, enable Touch ID. It's so important.
Now, this next one goes from I accidentally saw to single white female territory. Keyloggers are a thing that you might have to worry about.
They are now. It's crazy. Keyloggers or keystroke loggers are little programs that get installed on your computer, and they record every single key press on your keyboard. Cyber criminals use these to steal passwords and other sensitive data. But if you have a suspicious partner or coworker, they could use one of these to see what you're up to. I recommend that you use an up-to-date file scanner to check and remove anything that looks like a key scanner or a keylog scanner.
And finally, something that is no accident, monitoring software.
There's a slew of apps out there that track your location activity, especially for the iPhone. Most of these, they're aimed at parents who want to keep track of their kids. We've already talked about that here, and we've warned against it. But since we're talking about relationships, there's a real privacy concern there, too. Good security and privacy starts with you. You need to make sure only you have access to your devices. Along with that, don't let anybody download apps to your phone or your laptop but you. And if you're using a Mac, you should install a tool that looks out for this stuff.
Well, part of me doesn't want to do this next story because there's a really good chance that it'll be out of date by the time I finish this sentence I'm saying right now. Still, though, I guess if I make the sentence longer, then there's even more of a chance. It does give us a good opportunity, though, this story does, to reinforce a few points that we've hit before, so here we go. Hackers release first public jailbreak for up-to-date iPhones in years, reads an article from Vice. Now, I want to go ahead and stop me right here, August, or you can. Jailbreaking has remained a thing, right? Is it just the up-to-date part that makes this story a story?
Yeah, first of all, I'm really confused by the jailbreak thing. Why would you do this other than to be able to say, because I can? It opens up your device to vulnerabilities and makes your phone less secure. But to answer your question, yes, I think the up-to-date part is the only thing that makes this a story. Apple tends to patch jailbreak hacks pretty quickly, and it's been a long time since a public jailbreak was available.
This was not something we were going to talk about, but let me ask you really quickly. Because I can was seriously a reason that a lot of people that I knew who did jailbreaking years ago. There was a guy, I remember the first, he had me playing Duck Hunt on his iPhone because he had jailbroken his iPhone and went to Cydia or someplace and downloaded Duck Hunt. And of course, it crashed his phone every 30 seconds, but he was really excited about having done that. A couple of years later, I knew somebody who was all excited about getting her phone jailbroken, and she had no idea why she was getting her phone jailbroken. It was just she was excited about being able to get her phone jailbroken. There are people who like to get under the hood. I mean, I would imagine that Woz would be a guy who would jailbreak his phone. There are people who may have legitimate research concerns, but really, I mean, there are people who just like to get in and play and see what they can do.
I totally agree, but I also kind of compare it to the way Apple looks at the world versus the way PCs look at the world, in that, Apple says, here's a computer, use it. And PCs will sit there and go, here's a computer. We've made it so you can expand it. You can add more memory. You can add another video card. You can add all of this other stuff. And everyone's like, well, yeah, I want that because I want to be able to customize it. Mm-hmm. And the fact is that you get it home and no one ever customizes it. There's a handful of people that do, but they're selling it on the idea that that's what you want, and most people don't want that.
Yeah, I mean, the Apple's stated thing that Tim Cook especially, the stated thing that technology should get out of your way, it kind of means it's technology that you're not going to be able to crawl around inside that much. You're going to be able to do the thing that you theoretically got a computer to do, unless the thing you got the computer to do was to, tear it up and go inside, in which case, Windows machine, as you say, might be the way to go. Or I hear Linux is quite fun, according to a lot of people.
Raspberry Pi is where I'd go.
That's, I hear good things about that as well, if you're that kind of tinkerer, which, anyway, we're getting way off the topic of jailbreaking. According to Vice, Apple accidentally unpatched a vulnerability it had already fixed, making the current versions of iOS vulnerable to hackers. The piece goes on to say security researchers found this past weekend that iOS 12.4, the latest version released in June, reintroduced a bug found by a Google hacker that was fixed in iOS 12.3. That means it's currently relatively easy to not only jailbreak up-to-date iPhones, but also hack iPhone users, according to people who have studied the issue. Now, to the site's credit, it doesn't say which exploit of the 10s fixed in iOS 12.3 was unfixed, though a security researcher who hacks iPhones for a living said that organizations that have the expertise to target iPhones can now use a bug in Safari, for example, to hack any up-to-date iPhone. Does that automatically mean that this, vulnerability that got unfixed, does that make this a WebKit vulnerability, or am I oversimplifying?
No, I think it does. But because it's publicly available, the jailbreak, there's, I'm certain, a team at Apple who are being yelled at right now to try and figure out how to lock it down and make sure that doesn't happen again.
No, I got to say, I feel a bit ridiculous when it comes to jailbreaking because I always assume that people who jailbreak are opening themselves to security issues. After 10 plus years of watching this space, this article is the clearest illustration that I remember that the fact of a jailbreak, just the fact that a jailbreak exists means there are already security issues, whether you jailbreak your phone or not.
I totally agree. There are always going to be software vulnerabilities. It's not a perfect science. And that's the thing that people have to understand, is that sometimes there's going to be bugs. Those bugs can be exploited and people can go in and do nasty, nasty things. And you just have to make sure to be as protected as possible and hope that the powers that be, in this case Apple, are also working to lock those bugs down.
Now, I know neither of us, I think you said you jailbroke your phone years and years and years ago. I have never jailbroken a phone, but I know neither of us are actively jailbreaking at this point. I guess the thing that was illustrated here to me is the fact that today's version of iOS can be jailbroken does mean that that security is more at risk than normal. Generally speaking, a jailbreak, and correct me if I'm wrong if you can, if there's a jailbreak out there, the only way that's going to work for me 9 times out of 10 is because I have held my phone from going to the next version of an OS. So like if I hear that there's a new jailbreak available, chances are it's running on iOS 12.3 or 12.2 or, some earlier version of iOS. Right now, not to freak anybody out, but right now we're all a bit less secure because somebody was able to go, oh, look at that. I could do this on any iPhone that's out there currently. You're
absolutely right. In the past, jailbreaks have happened on previous versions of the OS, and people did hang on to old versions of the OS to make sure that they could keep jailbreaking. But Apple got wise, if you will, and they stopped code signing certain versions of the OS so that you couldn't install that on your iPhone anymore, which makes it a whole lot harder. In this particular case, yes, it's a vulnerability. Yes, you have to be very, very careful. And yes, it even affects people that don't have their phone jailbroken, which is the more scary part to me. But as I said, I'm sure that Apple is really working hard to fix that vulnerability. Beyond that, anytime you jailbreak your phone, you are opening yourself up to a lot of problems. Unless you've had time to study the code and that kind of thing, you don't know what you're installing on your phone. And that's the thing that you have to be careful about.
Passwords, part 47 in a moment. But first, a word about MacScan 3 from Secure Mac. That thing you shouldn't have opened, you opened it. That link you shouldn't have clicked, you clicked it. Now you've got something slowing down your Mac, maybe skimming data, maybe mining crypto. Maybe you didn't even do anything, you just visited a site that attacked a few tracking cookies. There are lots of things out there that you neither want nor need on your Mac. To eliminate them, there's MacScan 3. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by Secure Mac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for the Mac for well over a decade. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full-range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your computer. Keep your machine clean with MacScan 3 from Secure Mac. Sign up for a free 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. That's MacScan 3 by Secure Mac. Your 30-day free trial is waiting at securemac.com/MacScan. Right. Passwords part 92. Motherboard says hundreds of thousands of people are using passwords that have already been hacked. That's according to Google. I'm sure we've all done this, unknowingly used passwords that have been compromised. But here's the thing. The people about whom Google is talking know the passwords have been hacked. In a piece posted last week, Motherboard said a new Google study has confirmed the obvious. Internet users need to stop using the same password for multiple websites unless they're keen on having their data hijacked, their identity stolen, or worse. Now, we talk a lot on the checklist about not reusing passwords. We've also mentioned sites like Have I Been Pwned, which can help users track if their data has been exposed and whether they need to worry about their credentials bouncing around the dark web. But that requires action, knowing about and going to sites like Have I Been Pwned. So Google did something kind of cool earlier this year. According to the report, last February, Google unveiled a new experimental password checkup extension for Chrome. The extension warns you anytime you log into a website using one of over 4 billion publicly accessible usernames and passwords that have been previously exposed by a major hack or breach, and prompts you to change your password when necessary. And a quarter of the people ignored the warning and kept using compromised passwords anyway. To be clear, that's a quarter of the compromised. Google says in the first month alone, they scanned 21 million usernames and passwords and flagged over 316,000 as unsafe. That's 1.5 of sign-ins scanned by the extension. But it was a quarter of those that kept on keeping on. According to Motherboard, users opted to ignore 81,368, or 25.7% of the breach warnings presented to users, the study found. The researchers surmised this could be due to the fact that the users were confused by the warning and reset process, didn't think a reset was worth their time, or weren't fully in charge of the impacted account. The impacted account was a shared household account. Now, as frustrating as I personally find this story, Google's reasoning as to why people would ignore the warnings does seem legit.
It does. It's human nature. But it also really points to why passwords just aren't effective anymore for security purposes. They just aren't.
Now, the report goes on to say the study also found that while users often remember to change passwords for major sites, they're 2.5 times more likely to reuse vulnerable passwords everywhere else, opening them to account hijacking threats. This latest study found that the risk of hijacking was highest for video streaming and porn websites, where between 3.6 and 6.3% of logins relied on breached credentials. That number was much lower for financial and government sites, where only 0.2 to 0.3% of logins involved compromised login information, Google found. Well, look who's watching fancy porn. Needs a password. I'll tell you what this actually reminds me of. The conversation we had a few weeks ago about whether any site or set of sites was unimportant enough that you could reuse passwords on them.
And I still stick by my answer. Don't do it. Every site has the potential to be hacked, and every site with your password has the potential to let that password go public. So just don't do it.
Now, running this story by the guys at Secure Mac, one of them pointed out that the streaming password numbers could actually be magnified by the fact that lots of people share streaming services by sharing their passwords. That's basically upping the risk that somebody who has that password will either reuse it somewhere else because they're lazy or otherwise increase the chances of the password leaking.
You know, I saw on Facebook where a friend of mine was asking their friends for an HBO password.
Nice. Right out in public. Right out in public.
You know, I totally get the desire to save a few bucks. Who wouldn't? But not only is the account holder paying the bill, so if you ask your buddy for his HBO password, you know, he's the one that's on the hook for the bill. They're also risking that password being let out in public if you guys ever decide to not be friends anymore. And that's scary stuff. You know, I don't even share passwords with my parents. I just don't.
Now, if you're looking for a good password primer, I mentioned it earlier, but I'll mention it again. Checklist number 8, password do's and don'ts, has you covered. More from the motherboard piece. Google says it's hopeful that secure, centralized, and democratized access to password breach alerts can help nudge otherwise oblivious internet users to updating their credentials. I say, I admire Google's optimism. Hey, if you're looking for more security news and how-tos, the place to look is securemac.com/checklist. There you will find notes for this show, for all the shows we've done before, and links, by the way, to listen to all those shows that I talked about earlier. So the one 2FA 101, I believe that was checklist number 139, or checklist number 8, password do's and don'ts. You can find the notes for those shows right there, and you can listen to them right there. securemac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you'd like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. And we'll talk to you next week.